there are certain basic principles when it comes to labor law. Not too many centuries ago, if you remember the late 18th and the early 19th century, there was a time when there were no labor laws. And employers were given the full freedom to extract work from workers as they pleased. So what did we see there? We saw child labor. We saw women working even when they were pregnant. We saw workers working under horrendous work conditions. We saw that employers can even extract work from employees for 24 hours or even like continuously extract work from them. And we saw employers had the right to extract work without paying decent wages so that a person can go home and live a life. So this is not too far back. This is just 2 centuries ago. So for centuries, workers, unions struggled and fought. And the labor protection we have in this country today is a result of these struggles. The fact that we have 8-hour workday, the fact that if you need to extract more work from workers, you need to pay overtime pay. The fact that women can go for maternity leave, paid maternity leave. The fact that women have protection when they engage in night work. The fact that you can't engage children in work. The fact that there are mandatory holidays for workers. These did not just come overnight. These were fought and won through decades of struggle by workers and unions. So our government, the Labour Minister, comes in the last 2-3 months and says, we want to bring in employer-friendly labour laws. We want to bring in investor-friendly labour laws because apparently investors are deterred by the type of labour laws we have. Apparently our labour laws are too rigid. They say we need flexible labour laws. Our labour laws are too rigid. So I want to break this down. Labour laws, as I was mentioning, has a few functions, and that is the core of why labour laws exist. The function is that it should protect workers. It should protect workers against whom? It should protect workers against exploitation by employers. So employers are the exploiters here. To protect only, we have labour laws to protect workers. So any labour law which is brought in, instigated by people who are supposed to be exploiting workers, is not labour law. It is maybe employers' law, it is maybe companies' law, but it's definitely not labour laws. So in the last 2-3 weeks, this minister has had this facade called consultation, and all employers' organization, whether it be the Employers' Federation, whether it be the JAF, whether it be members on the BPO sector, and also interestingly the Bar Association, apparently, have come and said very, very similar things to this so-called consultation. So they are saying we need to have, the employers must have the right to fire and hire. They are saying employers must have the right to have flexible work days. Now what they mean by flexible is that they need to have the right to decide whether workers should work for 8 hours or whether workers should work for 15 hours without the involvement of the state. They are saying that the so-called women must have the equal rights to work at night. What they are not saying is that the protection afforded to women to not engage in precarious work, to not engage in work which will end up with sexual harassment for women, they want to have the right to exploit the labor of women. They are saying they need to have the freedom to decide on wages of what ought to be paid for a particular work. So if you look at the sum total of what the employees are saying, what essentially they are saying is that we want to have the right to exploit women. We want to have the right to encourage women to take breaks, the so-called maternity leave, without burdening us with paying for maternity leave. We want us, when I say us, the employers say, we don't want to be burdened with social security contributions. We want to have the freedom, the employers want to have the freedom to arrange work hours so that they don't have to pay overtime wages for work. So this is what the employers have been saying. So today, why we have gathered here today is to ask workers, but also to ask the general public to really think through what the employers and the government are getting together and doing against workers who have worked through crises after crisis, who have worked through the COVID crisis, who have worked through the economic crisis and held our country together. Do not allow our government and the employers to remove labor protection and workers' protection, which has protected workers for this long. Do not allow the freedom for employers to exploit. And in fact, It is not too many years ago. It was only in 1844 that slavery was abolished in Sri Lanka. Now, if we allow these labor protections to go through, what we are allowing is for slave-like working conditions to start existing. And in 2021, the Special Rapporteur for against modern forms of slavery, in fact, came and said, due to not implementing laws and regulations in this country, slave-like work conditions are already existing. Because labor laws which exist in this country are not being implemented properly, slave-like work conditions are existing. So now we want to, without looking into why these labor laws are not implemented, we want to remove, the employers want to remove labor protection for workers so that we could go into slavery days. I should also mention at this point two things. When we leave certain things to the employer's discretion, for instance, the national minimum wage, unions have been agitating for years to increase the national minimum wage from 16,000 to at least 26,000, at least. In this day and age, it should be 40 or 50,000. But 3-4 years ago, we were agitating for a minimum wage of 26,000. To date, because of employers' lobby, not a cent has been raised on the national minimum wage. So this is what happens when you leave it to the freedom of employers to decide what ought to be the wage, what ought to be the working conditions of workers. And because the minister keeps saying we need to have investor-friendly laws, I just want to cite a Harvard report which came out in 2018, where the report specifically states that our labor laws are not a deterrent for investments. In fact, investors who promote themselves as people obtaining ethical labor from third world countries, in fact, those investors are more likely to come into this country because we have strong labor protections. So what the government has been saying in terms of labor laws being a deterrent to investments is a complete lie. The government, for whatever reason, is pressured by employer lobby to weaken labor protection so that we could go back into days of slavery. And I urge everyone who is listening to this press to stand with unions, to stand with mass organizations who have been campaigning for stronger labor protection, who have been campaigning to implement the existing labor laws, to stand with us to protect workers from exploitation and from exploitative work conditions. Thank you.